It is the 14th of August, 2026, and we got a little bit to talk about today. First off, I want to talk about lawsuits. You know, your friendly neighborhood longevity doc, Dr. Murphy, is well aware of lawsuits, right? And so we now see some lawsuits coming up against the people selling research use only peptides. In this case, a peptide that isn't even FDA approved yet, called Retatrutide. Why are we seeing this type of enforcement rather than the FDA going after these medicines and the companies that are selling them? Well, I think the answer is simple. It's not even an FDA approved drug yet. So how can it be advertised for things that are FDA approved? And the answer is it's not. So when we saw the PCAC meeting, and trust me, I watched the whole thing, was texting between people the whole way through it, what we saw was a strong desire by the FDA rank and file to push peptides into this category called the investigational new drug category. Well, there's a pushback on the other side, and that is to drive peptides to the nutrition and supplement for generalized wellness pathway. Now, if you're selling a nutritive supplement, well, back in the day, President Clinton signed a free-for-all for all those companies. So basically, if you are not intended to treat a disease or a condition or prevent a disease, you can sell whatever you want, basically, especially if it shows up on the generally recognized as safe list or the GRAS list. So this is a really big area of fight going on in the Make America Healthy Again community, in the corporate community of wellness. And so a doctor like me, board certified in internal medicine, obesity medicine, trained at big academic centers, would call those people grifters if I was still at a big academic center, but I'm not. So because of that, I recognize that a lot of these people have really good scientific knowledge, and they are using animal studies and they're using little small studies of humans. Well, in this case, Retatrutide, whatever the world you want to call it, whatever magical name that pharma makes for it, this molecule has a crapload of good data. Retta has great data. It has safety data. It has efficacy data. It just has not been approved by the FDA yet. Why? Because the company that spent a lot of money researching and developing this peptide just happens to be trying to avoid your friendly neighborhood capitalist trying to sell it as a wellness product, or your friendly neighborhood pharmacist from compounding it as a therapeutic at a cost much lower. That is the big fight going on with Retta. It's not that it doesn't work. This is not, we're not talking a PCAC committee with a bunch of academic doctors saying, well, I just don't see the evidence that it works, despite AAPM presenting legions of data about those peptides. You can't have this discussion with Retta. You just can't. Retatrutide, whatever you want to call it, is safe and it's effective. So naturally, the pharmaceutical company, and you can quote me on safe and effective. Every medication has risks. Every medication ideally has benefits. So you have to weigh the risk-benefit of every medication that you take. As I call it, a medication, it's peptide, which is used in a medicinal fashion, right, to heal something, to normalize your biochemistry. Retta, very effective. I agree. Dr. Hewitt, welcome aboard. All the other doctors, all the other subscribers, welcome aboard. Today's August 14th, 2026. Dr. Hewitt said, patients will continue to purchase from the gray market as the pharmaceutical companies price these peptides out of reach. She is absolutely correct. There is always going to be a gray market as long as there's a price point that humans cannot afford. It's just the way it's going to be. That is called arbitrage when you actually bring a dirt cheap thing into a market where they're willing to pay more. That someone said the other day, there's only like 4 ways to make money, right? One is labor, one is capital, one is arbitrage, and the other is insurance, right? Taking risk, moving something from low cost to high cost, trading your hours for money, or trading your money for income or growth. Those are really the only 4 ways to make money. And so because of that, we are going to see lots of issues here with arbitrage. The other side of it is risk. No one is taking the risk of having a bad gray market outcome. No one's taking that risk. And that's the problem here. There should be someone saying, if you get a bad batch, we'll compensate you. That there's a big model for that for the gray market, I believe. The gray market itself is going to continue to sell Retta. It's going to be a game of whack-a-mole, but I'm going to tell you right now, and this is what's important, I think, about the Retta story. Very important. Retta works. Retta is generally safe. There are side effects. There's the heart rate stuff. There's the exercise mimetic stuff about it that we're well aware of, that I've tracked. I even wrote about this, Dr. Hewitt, in my book 3 years ago with phase 1 data. Well, 2.5 years ago with phase 1 data where I said the molecule itself is designed to work very well. And now all the studies have proven that, which is why, as you can imagine, when I have patients who want to buy Retta, I tell them, number one, they should get it from a compounded pharmacy. The problem with that now is the following. The compound pharmacies are part of these lawsuits, right? So we have that. We also have resellers. And I think what's going to happen, we'll see, is people are going to start getting sued from Reddit boards, TikToks, WhatsApp, sales market channels. And pharma has more than enough money to do this. And they will just start crushing resale of Retta, which you, Dr. Hewitt, know as well as I do, is going to put the patient at higher risk because they're going to go for Bob's discount. And pretty soon they're in Shanghai trying to import Retta products. So there's real risk there, real risk. And who's going to insure that risk? That's what I want to know, because I think that's the reasonable business here in peptides. Theoretically, you'd ask the FDA to police that risk, but it's not an FDA-approved drug yet, which is why I think these lawsuits are so interesting. They're so interesting. But here's my advice to doctors out there. If you are helping people use research peptides, you should not be advertising that on your website. These lawsuits are classic examples. They pulled Reddit posts. They pulled website posts. They pulled social media to list as evidence of you selling a product that is protected by their patents. That's number one. Number two, I think about the fact that they referred 200 people to the Department of Justice and the FDA to get cracked down because they're breaking regulations. So we need to understand that these businesses are not just going to spend money filing a lawsuit. They're going to then, quote unquote, call the cops on you. And I know as well as anyone does, regulators love to make mountains out of molehills. And if you're a doctor using these peptides on patients like Retta, you better make sure that no one can make a mountain out of a molehill for you, because they will, because they get a promotion every scalp that they get. Every scalp they get an attaboy, they get a promotion, they get moved up. And this is a G4, G6, G11. Your physicians are putting their licenses on the line and putting them at risk to help patients use peptides for health and wellness. That's a big risk for doctors. Yeah, Dr. Hewitt, you have to use informed consents. You have to use informed consents. That's number one. Number two, research use only peptides, they are never administered in my office. Full stop. If you want to take research use peptides on your own, you do that. I'm going to be your Sherpa to make sure you don't kill yourself. I'm absorbing that risk of making sure you don't kill yourself, right? And there have been really anaphylactic reactions. I've even seen issues with compounded peptides as well. So number one, you got to use informed consents. Number two, research use peptides should not be in the clinic. They should not be administered in the clinic. They should not be white labeled in the clinic. I had a big orthopedic group out on the West Coast saying, oh, yeah, we're going to rebrand research use only peptides. We want you to come in as the advisor. I said, what are you smoking? Oh, no, don't worry about it. RFK Jr. is going to let all these research use only peptides in. These lawsuits just demonstrate that not only is your license at risk, but you could end up in a lawsuit putting research use only peptides in your office, white labeling them to make them brand aware. That's like one of the worst things you could do. That is one of the worst things you could do, because if there's an adverse reaction. Oh yeah. First off, I want to say this, Aggie. If there's an adverse reaction to a research use only peptide that you decided to brand with your special logo, you are now liable for whatever's in that vial. Why would you ever do that? Frankly, I still think you're liable for whatever's in the vial if you administer it in your office. That's crazy town. Using research use only peptides in your office is crazy town. And now we see that South Carolina is going after doctors. South Carolina Medical Board has just put a post out, a big alert out. I was licensed in South Carolina for years. A big post out that said, if doctors are selling research use only peptides, they could lose their license in the state. Right? So the question Dr. Hewitt has is, have you used legal aid to create extensive informed consents? Yes, costs about 10 grand. 10 grand, but I'm sure ChatGPT can put together a 80% good one, and then you run it through another AI and it'll turn it to 90% good, and you wouldn't have to spend 10 grand on this. But this is very expensive for us, right? It's very expensive. And so if people are using research only peptides, there's an informed consent there with me, which says, I will take care of you, but I am not prescribing research use only peptides. I am not liable for what's in the vial. That's on you. You pay someone else for that vial. You don't pay me for that vial. I would never be caught dead selling, branding, or distributing research use only peptides. That's a recipe for disaster. That's for sure. So that's the Retta lawsuits. Woo, right? There's a big deal. It's a big issue, and we'll see where it goes. The next thing I want to talk about is very important. I had a great talk with So Melissa asked the question before I go into my next thing. Melissa asked the questions, what are the cons? I imagine the cons of using a research use only peptide. Is that what you're asking, Melissa? Because if you are, here's the following con. Can you sue the TikTok shop that sold it to you? Can you get legal representation and get compensation for the damage from the compound pharmacy, not the compound pharmacy, the chemical manufacturer in China that got it for you? Okay, right. So health cons. Just like I said, first off, in medicine, there's this thing called tort law. So if I do something bad to you, you can get tort law, right? You get compensation for that. Health effects, right? So if you have a problem with aspirin or Tylenol, you can sue the manufacturer of aspirin or Tylenol because let's say you have like a debilitating paralysis. Or I have a case right now where I was just talking about where a doctor injected research use only peptides in a patient's spine, and now they have neurologic and immunologic side effects because God only knows what was in there. So there are side effects. There's side effects with anything that you take, Melissa. It's just whether you have tort law on your side to be able to get compensated for your damages. Now, we know that with, these guys that are supposed to prevent disease, right, that they put into people, we know that those are protected from tort law. So, yeah, that's a problem I have with preventative injections. It's also a problem I have with research use only injections. You have to be very careful with that. You have to be very smart and have good wherewithal. And ideally, you better have like a real certificate of analysis. It's very important that these get analyzed properly. If you don't have, a good example, I have a friend and patient who is a PhD MD who runs his own chemical discovery company. In his company, he tests his research use only peptides because he can. Not everyone else has that. Oh, oh. All right, Melissa. So Melissa has a question. She's like, is there a downside or a health effect? I assume she's thinking about Retatrutide, not about the other GLP-1s. Retatrutide has way less muscle loss. The other thing about Retatrutide is that the downside theoretically is it's glucagon it works like pretending that you don't have glucose in your body. It works like pretending, and we know sort of like rapamycin. That works by pretending that we don't have food in our body, right? Like we're fasting. It's sort of like a fasting mimic. Reta is like a you don't have enough sugar in your body mimic, right? So it 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 works on glucagon. So what happens when you don't have sugar in your body? Does anyone know? Well, your heart rate goes up, you get a little flu-y feeling. Some people get fevers. That is side effect issues. And what happens if you don't have enough glucose? Do you lose muscle mass? You don't really as much. And the thing with the GLP-1s, as a general rule for GLP-1, they burn fat from your body and your face. And so Ozempic face is because you lose fat in your face quicker. You also lose protein, right? Because you're not eating enough protein and you're not challenging your muscles enough. Reta is not as harsh as I would say semaglutide is in this effect. So that's the muscle loss stuff. The physical damage, well, I can tell you right now, there's studies on GLP-1s to actually prevent osteoarthritis regression. There's a phase 2 study on semaglutide injected in the knee to see if it can prevent cartilage degeneration. So in terms of like physical damage, I would say the following. The GLP-1s probably are not causing anything other than muscle loss. The argument is whether that's good muscle that's getting lost or it's senescent muscle cells that's getting lost. That's the debate. But you're losing muscle nonetheless. Number two, Reta does not really have nearly as much of that muscle loss as semaglutide does. Therefore, it is a superior product. And I wrote about that in my book, right? Weight Loss Secrets, the ultimate guide to GLP-1 medications. In addition to that, the Reta I've seen it jack your heart rate up, shrink your HRV a little bit. So there are some other peptides you can use, or even just like getting sun and being circadian appropriately. As you can tell by the red side of my face here, the computer screen is red. The light block also sitting there is red. That's to protect circadian rhythm stuff. So I've been cranking a long time here. I hope that answered your question, Melissa. Number two, the second thing I want to talk about today, which I think is very, very, very important in this whole space altogether. Lawsuits are one thing. U.S. Department of Justice prosecutions are another. And we just saw Matthew Kawa get sentenced to 70 months because he was selling nutritional supplements that were laced with testosterone. I happened to talk to one of the patients that was afflicted, Dan Murphy, great guy. Dan was taking the equivalent of 1,500 milligrams of testosterone a week, unbeknownst to him. It put him into psychosis. He almost lost his marriage. He lost it. Like, we're talking really bad stuff. So this sort of answer to Melissa. If we don't regulate these things, then you're left to having to file a lawsuit. So what's interesting about Dan Murphy's case and the U.S. Department of Justice is this case had been going on for years. Getting justice takes years. And remember, that's a criminal lawsuit. So theoretically, he's not really compensated. The government takes fines and the guy goes to jail. But now there's a civil lawsuit. Well, what are you going to get? You're going to get blood from a stone? Oh, no, Aggie. I'm frozen. So, Aggie just let me know I'm frozen, so I'm switching off of Wi-Fi. Hopefully that helps. Yes, I know. And now Thank goodness we've got Substack here telling me that my internet is unstable. So hopefully you guys can get me now. So point two I was talking about was the Department of Justice going after research use only people like Matthew Kawa, who was just sentenced to 70 months in jail. Why? Because he was selling compounds that were laced with medicines. And in one case, testosterone. And so, as I was saying before, Dan Murphy out in Tennessee taking a SARM to try and help heal himself, help boost his testosterone levels. Well, he overshot it, right? He ended up with taking 1,500 milligrams of testosterone a week. He didn't want to take testosterone, but the research use only peptide and wellness vendor that sold to him had it laced with testosterone. So the guy went to jail. Dan, justice is served. But is Dan compensated for his injuries? Well, no, he has to bring a civil lawsuit. But he can bring a civil lawsuit in the United States. The problem with research use only peptides, who are you going to sue? Reddit, WhatsApp, TikTok? You're not going to sue them. And that's the challenge I have here. So issue number one is that there's civil lawsuits that are going to happen with Retta. Issue number two is, will there be criminal lawsuits that happen in regards to these peptides? And I don't think they're breaking any laws criminally at all, unless they're lacing it with other things. And that theoretically is a criminal law. So my advice for those who want to use research use only peptides in 30 seconds. If you're using research-only peptides, one, you really better get it independently tested. Don't just trust the certificate analysis that's probably been photoshopped by some TikTok seller who's just pivoting from handbags to Retta, right? That's number one. Number two, if you're using research-use-only peptides, you better be checking your labs, and you better be having a doctor that's peptide-aware, peptide-competent, peptide literate, able to guide you in your course. That's number two. Number three, if you're using research only, use only peptides, you place yourself at risk. If you use compound pharmacy peptides, you also place yourself at risk, but that risk is lower, and that risk is backstopped by the license of the pharmacy. If you're using research use only peptides, that's not the case. So there's a risk there. Whatever, and number three or four, whatever you are saving in money for research use only peptides, you should be spending that money on testing your body, testing your blood, making sure that the peptide is getting independently tested. In the United States, there are always going to be people that are trying to save money to get healthy. That's the way it is. I could eat McDonald's beef patties until the cows come home to save money. Well, these days you can't. McDonald's is just as expensive as Five Guys. But you could be buying chicharron, right? You could either buy real chicharron or you could buy pork rinds. If you buy pork rinds, you're not going to get as healthy a meal. It'll be cheap, but it's not as healthy for you. Peptides could be similar. You save a buck, but you may not be getting what you paid for. That's it. My internet's unstable. Today is August 14th, 2026. I hope you have a great weekend. Here's to a life well lived.